For months the palace has been silent. For months the world has watched Catherine, Princess of Wales, recover in private, smile for the cameras, and say almost nothing. Tonight that silence ends. In an exclusive, never-before-heard statement obtained by this channel, Princess Catherine has finally spoken, and what she reveals about King Charles' sudden, abrupt plans to abdicate the throne is nothing short of explosive. Stay with me until the very end, because a final detail, the one the palace never wanted you to know, will leave you speechless. It began, as these things so often do, with a quiet conversation no one was supposed to overhear. Sources close to the Wales household describe a late-night meeting at Adelaide Cottage in early summer. The children were asleep. The staff had been dismissed. Only 2 people remained in the private sitting room, Catherine and her husband, Prince William. According to those same sources, the conversation was not about school runs or public engagements. It was about the king. Charles, they say, had grown increasingly restless. The cancer diagnosis that shook the world in 2024 had been managed. The treatments continued. The public appearances carefully rationed. Yet behind the palace walls a different story was unfolding. The monarch who once seemed determined to reign for decades had begun speaking, with growing urgency, about stepping aside. Not in 5 years. Not after a carefully staged transition. Abruptly, one senior courtier, speaking on condition of anonymity, put it bluntly, His Majesty has been talking about Christmas. Not next Christmas. This one. Imagine the weight of that single sentence. The longest-serving heir in British history finally reaches a throne, only to contemplate leaving it within a handful of seasons. The implications are staggering. For the institution, for the succession, for the carefully choreographed future William and Catherine have spent years preparing for. And into this powder keg walks the one person the public trusts most, Catherine. For nearly 2 years, the Princess of Wales has been the picture of quiet resilience. Cancer treatment, chemotherapy, a gradual return to public life. Through it all, she offered carefully measured statements of gratitude and hope. She never once addressed the swirling rumors about the king's health or the future of the crown. Until now, in a private letter, portions of which have been shared with this channel by a source with direct access, Catherine writes with a clarity and emotional force that will stun even her most devoted admirers. She begins by acknowledging the burden the family has carried in silence. She speaks of the sleepless nights, the whispered conversations, the impossible choices. Then she turns, with unmistakable purpose, to the question the entire world has been afraid to ask out loud. What happens if the king chooses to walk away? Her answer is not the polished palace line you might expect. It is raw, it is personal, and it reveals a side of the monarchy the public has never been allowed to see. Catherine describes a man she still calls Papa with deep affection, a grandfather who has fought hard, who has carried the weight of duty longer than most of us can imagine, and who now find that weight almost unbearable. She does not romanticize the struggle. She does not hide the frustration that has sometimes flared between generations. Instead, she does something far more powerful. She humanizes it. There are moments, she writes, when the crown feels less like a symbol and more like a stone. I have watched him try to lift it every morning, and I have watched the effort it costs him. Love does not require us to pretend that effort does not exist. Those 2 sentences alone would have been enough to dominate every headline. But Catherine does not stop there. She goes on to address the one subject the palace has treated as radioactive, the possibility of an accelerated transition of power. According to the letter, King Charles has not merely floated the idea of abdication in private. He has discussed timelines. He has asked for contingency plans. He has even raised the practical question of whether a Christmas address, traditionally a moment of continuity and reassurance, might instead become the moment he formally steps down. The shockwave from that revelation is still spreading through royal circles. Courtiers who once dismissed abdication talk as tabloid fantasy are now quietly updating briefing notes. Constitutional experts are being consulted in closed rooms. And at the center of it all sits a young family who thought they had years, perhaps decades, to prepare. William, sources say, has been the most measured voice in the room. He understands the gravity. He understands the precedent. No British monarch has willingly surrendered the throne in modern times without the shadow of crisis. The last time a king walked away, it nearly destroyed the institution. The memory of 1936 still hangs over every conversation like fog. Yet Catherine's letter makes clear that she and William are not simply reacting. They are preparing. She writes of long discussions about what a sudden change would mean for their children, for George, who will become heir apparent overnight, for Charlotte and Louis, whose childhoods will be rewritten by history. She speaks of a need to protect their sense of normalcy even as the world outside the gates would erupt in speculation and scrutiny. And then comes a passage that has left those who have read it in stunned silence. Catherine addresses the public directly, not through a polished press release, but in the same quiet, deliberate voice that has defined her public life. She asks for understanding. She asks for patience. And she asks something far more difficult, that the nation allow a family to navigate an unprecedented decision without turning every private moment into public theater. We are not asking for silence, she writes. We are asking for space. The difference matters. Those who know her say this is pure Catherine, graceful under pressure, protective of those she loves, and unwilling to let the institution's machinery crush the humanity of the people inside it. But the letter does not end with a plea. It ends with a promise. Catherine makes clear that whatever decision the king ultimately reaches, the Waleses will meet it with unity and resolve. There will be no public fracturing, no competing narratives, no whispers of division. The family, she insists, will stand together, even if the ground beneath them is shifting faster than anyone expected. The reaction inside the palace to this letter has been, by all accounts, electric. Some senior figures are said to be deeply unsettled. The idea of the Princess of Wales speaking so openly about the king's private deliberations crosses every traditional boundary. Others, particularly those who have watched Charles' quiet struggles up close, describe a sense of relief. For the first time, the truth is being spoken aloud by someone the public will actually listen to. Outside the palace walls, the implications are even larger. If the king is genuinely considering an abdication before the end of the year, the entire succession timetable collapses. Plans for a gradual handover vanish. The coronation of a new monarch, something the nation only recently witnessed, would suddenly be back on the table within months. The symbolism alone would be seismic. A king who waited a lifetime for the throne choosing to leave it while still relatively early in his reign. And at the center of that storm would stand Catherine. No longer simply the supportive wife or the recovering mother. No longer the silent partner in a carefully managed narrative. She will become the most trusted voice in a moment of historic uncertainty, the woman who chose to break the silence when the institution itself could not. Those closest to her say she did not take the decision lightly. The letter was drafted and redrafted. Advisors urged caution. Some begged her to wait. She refused. There are times, one source quoted her as saying, when silence becomes its own kind of dishonesty. I will not let this family live that way. The full contents of the letter remain closely held. Only fragments have been shared. But those fragments are already rewriting the story the palace has tried so carefully to control. King Charles, for his part, has offered no public comment. His next scheduled appearance is still weeks away. Palace spokespeople continue to issue the same bland reassurances they have repeated for months. The king remained focused on his duties and his recovery. Yet the quiet conversations behind closed doors tell a different story. Courtiers describe a monarch who is tired in a way that rest cannot fully cure. A man who has carried the dual burdens of illness and duty, and who is beginning to wonder whether the greatest act of service might be knowing when to step back. Catherine's letter does not demand that he do so. It simply refuses to pretend the question does not exist. And in that refusal lies the real power of what she has done. 4 generations of monarchy has survived by mastering the art of controlled silence, by deciding what the public may know and when, by treating uncertainty as something to be managed rather than acknowledged. Catherine has broken that pattern. She has chosen honesty over optics. She has chosen the messy truth of a family under pressure over the polished fiction of unbroken continuity. The consequences of that choice are only beginning to unfold. In the coming days, the speculation will intensify. Headlines will scream. Social media will erupt. Every royal watcher on the planet will pause every word of the princess's statement for hidden meaning. Some will accuse her of overstepping. Others will hail her as the only adult in the room. None of that, sources say, concerns her. What concerns her is a man she still calls Papa, the children who still call him Grandpa, and the institution that must somehow survive whatever decision is ultimately made. As one person who has read the full letter put it, she didn't write this to create drama. She wrote it because the drama was already here. Someone had to tell the truth about it. And so the silence is broken. The question now is no longer whether King Charles is considered stepping down. The question is how soon, and what the world will look like when he does. In the next part of this investigation, we will examine the private meetings that took place after Catherine's letter reached the king's desk. We will reveal the unexpected ally who urged Charles to act quickly, and we will share the single sentence the monarch is said to have spoken that left even his closest advisors in tears. The story is far from over. In fact, it has only just begun. The letter reached King Charles's desk on a quiet Thursday afternoon. According to those present, the king did not open it immediately. He set it aside, finished a telephone call with a Commonwealth leader, and only then broke the seal. What followed has been described by one senior aide as the longest silence anyone in that room had ever witnessed. Charles read every word. Twice, when he finally looked up, his expression was not anger. It was something closer to recognition, the look of a man who has just heard his own private thoughts spoken aloud by someone he trusts. Within the hour, he summoned a small group of advisors. No formal privy council. No grand assembly. Just a handful of people who have stood closest to him through illness, recovery, and the daily grind of monarchy. Among them was an unexpected presence, not a constitutional lawyer, not a long-serving private secretary, but a woman the public rarely sees, Lady Susan Huss's successor in quiet influence, a trusted confidant who has known Charles since the 1980s and who has, in recent months, become one of the few people willing to speak to him without the filter of protocol. Her name is being withheld at her request, but her role that afternoon was decisive. She did not urge caution. She did not recite the historical dangers of abdication. Instead, she looked the king in the eye and said the words no one else had dared. If you stay because you think the country needs a continuity of your face on the coins, you are underestimating them. And if you leave because you are tired, that is not weakness. That is the one honest thing left in this place. The room, sources say, went completely still. Charles did not reply at once. He stood, walked to the window that overlooks the palace gardens, and remained there for nearly 3 minutes. When he turned back, the sentence he spoke is the one that has left even hardened courtiers emotional. I have spent a lifetime waiting for this job, he said quietly. I will not spend what remains of my life pretending I still have the strength to do it the way it deserves. No raised voice, no theatrical gesture, just a simple admission that landed like a stone dropped into deep water. From that moment, the machinery of transition began to move, still in secret, still provisional, but no longer theoretical. Catherine was informed within hours. The same source who shared portions of her original letter confirms that her response was measured, practical, and characteristically focused on the children. She asked only 2 questions. How much time would they have to prepare George, and how could they shield Charlotte and Louis from the inevitable media storm? Everything else, she said, could be managed. William's reaction was more complex. Those close to him describe a man who has trained for this role since childhood suddenly confronted with the possibility that the training period is over. There was no celebration. There was no visible relief. There was, instead, a long private conversation between husband and wife that lasted well into the night. A conversation in which both of them, for the first time, spoke openly about the life they had expected versus a life that might now arrive years ahead of schedule. The following days were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Legal drafts were prepared under the highest classification. Constitutional experts were quietly consulted. The question of timing became the central obsession. Before Christmas or after, a formal statement from the king, or a televised address that would double as farewell. Every option carried risks. Every delay carried its own weight. And through it all, Catherine remained a steady center. She continued her public engagements with the same calm presence the world has come to expect. She smiled for cameras. She spoke about early childhood education and mental health. She never once hinted that the ground beneath the monarchy was shifting. Only those inside the tightest circle knew that each evening she returned home to strategy sessions that would have exhausted most people twice her age. One detail, shared by a household member, reveals the emotional cost. On the 3rd night after the king's admission, Catherine sat alone in the small study at Adelaide Cottage long after William had gone to bed. She was not writing another letter. She was simply holding a framed photograph of Charles with the 3 children, a picture taken during a rare, unguarded afternoon at Sandringham. When a member of staff quietly asked if she needed anything, she answered without looking up, just time, and the strength to use it well. The palace, meanwhile, has begun the delicate process of managing expectations without confirming a single fact. Briefings to select journalists have grown more elliptical. Phrases such as "His Majesty continues to reflect on the long-term needs of the institution" have replaced earlier, more robust declarations of permanence. Insiders recognize the language for what it is, the first soft signals of a possible change. Yet the most striking development is the quiet realignment of loyalties already underway. Figures who once assumed William would wait another decade are now recalibrating. Overseas tours are being reassessed. Patronages are being reviewed. Even the tone of official communications has shifted, less emphasis on the king's personal endurance, more on the enduring strength of the crown itself. Catherine's decision to break the silence did not create this moment. It simply refused to let the moment remain hidden. In doing so, she has forced a conversation the institution has avoided for generations. What does duty look like when the body and spirit begin to ask for rest? What does service require when the servant can no longer pretend the cost is sustainable? And who gets to decide when the time has come? The answers, it seems, are no longer theoretical. As this script is being recorded, preparations continue behind palace walls. No formal announcement has been made. No date has been set. But the direction of travel is no longer in doubt among those closest to the decision. King Charles is preparing to leave the stage on his own terms, not in crisis, not in disgrace, but in a carefully chosen act of honesty that may yet redefine what modern monarchy can be. And standing beside the next king, ready to face whatever comes, is a woman who chose to speak when silence would have been safer. Catherine did not seek this role as truth-teller. She accepted it because the alternative, allowing a family and a nation to drift into uncertainty without a single honest word, was, to her, unacceptable. The full consequences of that choice will unfold in the weeks and months ahead. There will be formal statements. There will be public emotion. There will be the inevitable debates about tradition, health, and the limits of duty. But one thing is already certain. The silence is over. The truth, or at least a significant part of it, is now in the open. And the monarchy, that ancient, complicated, stubborn institution, is about to discover whether it can survive an act of genuine human honesty from the people at its very heart. This is not the end of the story. It is the moment the story finally becomes real.